Hey guys, welcome back to Pistons Talk podcast post-game show. All-Star break is officially over. I missed you guys. I know it was only maybe a couple days since we've done a post-game podcast, but I honestly miss doing these, a couple times a week. The Pistons were in San Antonio, actually Austin, Texas, if you want to be technical. Played the Spurs tonight. No Wimby for you guys that didn't catch it. He had a thrombosis in his right shoulder, which is the medical term for a blood clot. So he's going to be out for the remainder of the season. So there was no Victor Wembanyama tonight against the San Antonio Spurs. But let's get into this first quarter by your Detroit Pistons. So they came out as the aggressors. It's something that I'm starting to get accustomed to now. It's such a role reversal. In the beginning of the season, they had a lot of difficulties coming into games and starting them off strong. But this was a team that pushed the pace, looked to run in transition, made defensive stops, and they got it. They got into a pretty nice lead against the Spurs. They were up as much as 14 points at one point in the first quarter. Tobias Harris led all scorers in the first with 10. He had a really great shooting night, 8 out of the 10 from the field, had over 20 points. So shout out to Uncle T. But I do think when I'm watching back this first quarter, they could have had a much bigger lead because they had 6 turnovers in the first quarter. And that's the only thing you could really nitpick with that first is just that the turnovers were a little sloppy at times. Some of the plays felt like they were trying to get up court as fast as possible. And that's where most of the turnovers did come in the first quarter. But overall, really solid first by the Pistons to have a lead. Going into the second, and I will say this was their worst quarter. And the only quarter I felt that uh, the energy wasn't there was the second. Spurs woke up offensively and defensively. Keldon Johnson just got into his bag. He just loves bullying smaller opponents, and he was taking advantage of Dennis Schroeder being switched on him quite a bit. And the Spurs got back into this game. The Pistons defense just really couldn't stop them in transition. But one thing about this team is if they get a punch in the mouth, they're going to get back up and punch back. And that's exactly what happened. About the last minute and a half of this second quarter, they go on a run and actually regain the lead. Um, I just mentioned that the second quarter was their worst quarter, but they came back, went on a little run. Cade and those guys got a 1 point lead going into halftime, 63-62. And Tobias had 18 points going into halftime, 6 out of 6 from the field. And they really leaned on him for a majority of the night. Now, coming out of halftime, just pure dominance by this team. They came out as the aggressors, pushed the pace, got into more running opportunities. And we mentioned it in the earlier this season that this is such a young, athletic team. They should be running in transition, pushing the pace, making their opponents try to play their style of basketball. And that's exactly what the Pistons and Cade Cunningham did. Cade looked the story. He stayed aggressive. Jalen Duren, good Lord, man. He had such a great game. He's just really putting together just good game after good game after good game. Like you have to give him his props and give him his flowers. He's just really turned it up. Something clicked. I don't know what it is. Could it be a SAR coming back where Jalen Durr doesn't have to cover as much ground defensively, so there's more energy there? Maybe, but you just have to, tip your cap to Jalen Durr. And he's been playing such great basketball. And the Pistons came out, got a lead the end of the third quarter, it was 101-80. There was nothing the San Antonio Spurs could really do tonight to stop the Pistons after they came out of halftime. Fourth quarter was the Jalen Duren show. Let's just say that. Like, he had one lob where I'm like, okay, that's a dunk of the night. Dennis Schroeder just threw a ball up there, caught it. Beautiful lob. And then about maybe a minute, 30 seconds later, he catches a bad pass that turns in probably into, I would say, up there with the dunk of the year. The way he caught it, he just like yanked it and threw it down. George Blaha, I've never heard him this animated. Um, I'd probably have to go back from like when I was in high school when Will Bynum used to throw some like thunder dunks. But like George Blaha is just so excited about this team. Um, Getting excited. There's a couple times where like he's screaming after some of these dunks, screaming after these lobs. But Jalen Duren had such a great fourth quarter, took a lot of the scoring load. Cade got to his spots, scored. The Pistons get their fifth win in a row and their first win in San Antonio since the 2014-15 season with a final score of 125 to 110. What a game. Good to see these boys keep, stacking the wins together. They have one more game to finish off the week this Sunday against the Atlanta Hawks. They have a chance to extend their winning streak to 6 games, but overall was really impressed with this game. I felt like they were pretty much in control um, for about 3.5 quarters. Just that the second quarter, the first like 9 minutes, they just weren't engaged, locked in defensively, but they turned it up and they closed this game out. They're getting confident. They have 30 wins. They're 30 and 26. They're 4 games over 500, and they're knocking on the door of that fifth seed. This is a really fun, young, exciting basketball team. There's just so many similarities um, when I think about the SVG led Pistons, and Tobias Harris was actually on that team. There's so many similarities with that team and this current Detroit Pistons team. And what I mean when I say there's so many similarities, it's they're having fun. There's team basketball. It's balanced scoring. The coaches are getting into it. The players are getting into it, and the fans are getting into it. And I think that's just it's enjoyable to watch. And we really haven't had enjoyable basketball to watch over the last 10 years. So I'm happy. I'm sure you guys are happy. If you are watching live on YouTube, we're going to take a short break, get into questions, comments, overall thoughts with this Pistons victory over the San Antonio Spurs. So if you guys have any questions or comments you want to leave in the live chat, if you're watching live on YouTube right now, drop them down below and I'll get to them right after I come back from a quick commercial break. And we are back. If you guys are new here, after we're done kind of talking about the quarters on these post game podcasts, we open up the show to questions, comments, overall thoughts. I feel like this is probably your favorite part of the podcast because I get to talk to you guys that are watching live on YouTube. And if you're an audio listener, no pressure. But if you ever want to come on these post game podcasts live on YouTube, I welcome you to. We talk directly after the game. Tons of topics. Sometimes it's about the game, sometimes it's not. But it's overall a good time. Want to get to Johnny as the first comment of today's post game show. He said, I'm glad we got this W after being swept by the Spurs last season. Yeah. I actually had to check because I was like, when's the last time the Pistons won in San Antonio? And it was, if you guys remember, when the Pistons formed a wall, Brandon Jennings hits that game winner off glass. And that team went on like a little winning streak, if you remember, after they waived Josh Smith. They were grooving, they were having a good time. But yeah, it's been quite a bit since the Pistons have won in San Antonio, 10 years to be exact. So good that the Pistons did get this W. The Spurs are a good basketball team. Don't get it twisted. Obviously, not having Victor Wembanyama is huge for them. But they played last night and they beat the Phoenix Suns. Like they're still a good basketball team. They have good players. They have Chris Paul. They have Harrison Barnes, Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell. Like they have players. This was a good quality win by the Detroit Pistons tonight, in my personal opinion. Want to go to my guy Jay Hart? Shout out. So let's go. What a day. Michigan State dub, followed by a Pistons dub. Amazing performance from Tobias, Tizzle, and JD. Uh, JD looked like we had our own big four in flashes tonight. Side note, Danny Wolf to the Pistons, question mark. Lots to unpack here, yo. Shout out Jay Hart. I know there was Michigan State basketball tonight. I didn't get a chance to watch it, but a lot of my friends are Michigan State fans. I do have some Michigan fans, and I saw more Michigan fans kind of salty after the loss. But I'm actually not a Michigan or a Michigan State fan. A little PSA. I'm actually a North Carolina fan, but happy that MSU did get the dub. Amazing performance from Tobias, Asar, and JD. Yeah, all those guys just played phenomenal tonight. It was great to see JD just have a dominant performance. Tobias has been on a heater as of late. Asar Thompson has been putting together games more consistently after they've been putting the ball in his hands and letting him be the initiator on offense, which I think has really opened up a lot for him. And in flashes tonight, like I saw someone say that Jalen Duran looks like a young Chris Webber, and those were the kind of the comps coming out of college, and you kind of see it just like really, really young Chris Webber, like Washington Bullets Chris Webber, right? Not like Sacramento Chris Webber, because I know some people will get it twisted, but yeah, Pistons they're looking good. Danny Wolf to the Pistons. They do have a second round pick. I kind of have Danny projected as a late first round pick, Jay Hart. But if the Pistons want to trade up for a guy of that skill set, I mean, who knows? Maybe Trajan likes him. Don't really know. We're pretty far out on NBA draft coverage. It's only the 21st of February, but I like where your head is at. Danny Wolf is going to be a really good player in the NBA, but always appreciate the comment and the love you show, Jay Hart. Got a comment from Cruza. The Pistons played dominant basketball for 3/4 of this game. Yeah, we kind of talked about it at the top of the podcast about how the Pistons for probably 3/4 they were just the better basketball team. There's just like a really short spurt, like a 7-8 minute spurt where the Spurs were just more dominant. But it's good to see that this team can just bounce back. If they get punched, they punch back and they keep punching. And that's something that I think JB has done a very good job of instilling into these guys of not quitting, not laying down. After there's like a little run by San Antonio, like you come back and you get the lead and you finish out that game. Like you're seeing growth from this team. Like you didn't see that last year. Um, you haven't seen it in probably years past, probably since like the Blake Griffin era, where this team can really, go on runs, get a lead, and sustain a lead and close out the basketball game. So it's been great to see. I have a comment from Dolly. Tobias has been playing great the past couple of weeks. I agree. I know a lot of us when we look at Tobias, and I know some fans, I'm not labeling all of you guys. There's a certain parts of the fan base that see the contract and they're not in love with it, which I understand. You gave him $53 million over a 2-year span. They expect him to get you 20 a night. When that's not really realistic at this stage of his career. But when he does have games like this, and as of late, he has been putting consistent scoring outbursts, helping the Pistons get these wins over the last 5. This team can really just fire on all cylinders. And Tobias Harris has been such a great addition by this front office that, when he is playing this well, it's a bonus because he does so many things off the basketball court that we don't see. A lot of people just talk about the professionalism, how he's just a great vet. uh, for Cade and the young guys. So happy Tobias is getting these scoring outbursts. 313 Dreams. I hope we don't have to choose between Ivy and Duran. So this is actually a question or more of a comment about contract extensions. I want to actually kind of like spin it this way. I think there's a world where you can keep both. And here's why. I don't honestly think the Pistons are going to have to massively overpay for either. There's a world where you can have Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duran still on your basketball team, and they could all be on new contracts and extensions. Obviously, Cade got one; it'll go into effect next year. Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duran are eligible for contract extensions. There's a world where you can keep all three, and you don't have to break up this core and just let these young guys develop and grow with each other. I don't think there's going to be a thing where, Jaden Ivey's demanding like $150 million, because I don't really think that uh, the Pistons would be willing to entertain that. But I do think Jaden Ivey will get paid. I think Jalen Duren will get paid as well. There's a world where you can keep both of those guys and not really have to worry about splitting up, or to your comment, trying to choose between Ivy or Duren. I think there's a world where you can keep both. I really do. I remember when we had Indris and Keldon Johnson back when Troy was a GM. He's a nice bench piece. Yeah, like Keldon Johnson has always been like low key a good player. I don't really think he gets talked about on a national scale too much, but I mean, like if you're just talking about a guy that can, score at all three levels, pretty good defender, has some like good size to him. He's kind of underrated in that aspect, and the Spurs have him and Devin Vassell, who are they're great wings. I've always kind of been a fan of Devin Vassell. I remember doing like pre-draft stuff during his draft class. I was a really big fan of his, but yeah, I do remember when Troy was initially interested in Devin Vassell, or not Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson. But hey, man, he's a good player. San Antonio's got a bright future too. Like, let's not get it twisted too much. With the emergence of Duran and Asar on the offensive end, we are fine with 15 points a game from Tobias. That's a really good outlook, Adam, because like the when we talked about Asar when he first got back, he was standing in the corner, and I want to give Case Cracked actually a shout out, because he was one of the very first uh people that pointed out like what's going on with Asar. Why aren't we utilizing him more? And I just saw Case Crack drop a couple comments in this live stream. I want to give him a shout out. And I told him like if they put the ball in his hands a little bit more, watch some tape, like you could really unlock Asar. And I think that's what they've been doing. Like I saw multiple possessions tonight. And this isn't something new where Asar is taking the ball up the court. He's initiating the offense. Kate is playing off ball. And I think Asar is talented enough as a basketball player where you can put the ball in his hands and let him initiate offense. Obviously, he does have to clean up with the turnovers a little bit, but some of the reads he makes are just next level stuff you just can't teach. He's just got a knack for making those like highlight reel passes. He's so athletic and really crash the glass offensively and defensively. So Tobias, to your point, can kind of take like that back seat, but when he is giving you 20 points a game, you're going to take it night in and night out. But definitely do agree with your analysis with the way Duran and Asar are playing. You don't really need to rely on Tobias as much on a night to night basis. Got a comment from Nick Gabber. Got to get the bench unit scoring more. Those scoring droughts won't help against teams like the Cavs and Celtics. I I agree with you, Nick. I think once Dennis Schroeder gets a little bit more comfortable, I think the offense will gel a little bit more. It's only what his fourth game, maybe fifth game with the Pistons. He's probably still kind of like learning the guys around him, learning the playbook. I think once you get Dennis Schroeder, at least 10 games under his belt, the offense will fire on more cylinders. More obviously, we'd like to see more out of Simone Fontecchio. He's just had a very uh, tough season And I don't know if it's the surgery he had this offseason. I don't know what's going on with him because last year he was a lot more active. He really ran the floor a lot harder. Seems like he's just settling for jump shots this year. I don't know if that's by design from the coaching staff, or maybe he's still kind of laboring that foot that he did have surgery on. But I do agree with you. If you want to compete with the Cavs, the Celtics, even the New Yorks to an extent, you're going to really have to have a second unit that can come in and just fire offensively. But I think JB and this coaching staff will figure it out. Like you definitely have a thing where I look at it and just give Dennis Schroeder a couple more games to get adapted with all the new guys around him. We have another comment from Super Bowl Cartier US. Um, I just question how will we get an adequate wing and or a number two level score next to Cade, especially when we're keeping Ivy and Duran and everyone. This is a great question. We can kind of break this down. I would say when I look at it, Jaden Ivey was having the probably his best career as a Piston. He was second in scoring next to Cade at 17 and a half, I think 17.6 to be exact, shooting 40% from the field, right? And I think Jaden Ivey could be that secondary scoring option. I don't think he's a finished product. I think he can get a lot better offensively. I think him shooting 40% from three is something that is obtainable. I think he could get better at finishing around the rim, but I think Jaden Ivey could be your number two level scorer. And that might sound a little optimistic. I know a lot of people want the Pistons to go out and get that star, that superstar, that number two next to Cade. But I think if you stay a little bit patient with Jaden Ivey and the way Cade's playing like a top 10, top 15 NBA player right now, there's no doubt in my mind that, Jaden Ivey could be that 20 point per game guy next to Cade, especially when he's feeling it offensively. Like the one game that I always go back to, and when I talk about Jaden Ivey, is the game in Phoenix when he came back from a toe injury. I want you to watch that game because Jaden Ivey was active defensively. He was firing on all cylinders, scoring at all three levels, and really making an impact on both ends of the floor. Um, I would just be a little bit patient with this backcourt because they're both incredibly young. They're not even 25 years old yet. We're already talking about like we need number two scoring option. I think if you stay a little bit patient with Jaden Ivey, he could definitely be a number two option next to Cade Cunningham. And I know some people probably don't agree with that. That's just how high am on Jaden Ivey personally. But I can understand people wanting to get like another two, maybe a small forward that scores a little bit more. I get it. I just don't know who that would honestly be personally. If you look at free agency, there's not like a whole lot that's probably appealing for the Pistons. You probably have to look at the trade market, and then it's just like, who are you giving up to get a number two option, a number two scoring option next to Cade? Like, what part of the young core are you going to try to give up? I think this front office is definitely looking at all those avenues. But I think for right now, when I look at, Ivy, I think he's definitely a guy that could be that number two option. And maybe some people don't agree with me. That's just the way I view it. I know Adam Perry says maybe it's Holland in a couple of years. I mean, yeah, if Holland keeps, progressing and getting better, maybe Holland's that number two. Um, I honestly think that when you look at it, a lot of fans, and I know it's just not Super Bowl. Like a lot of fans have always asked, like, when are we going to get that number two? When are we going to get that, superstar next to Cade? I get it. I just think like the way this core is developing and the way um, they're playing right now, I think you have to be very, very careful with your next like quote unquote big move because like if you think there's someone out there that's not on this team and you possibly trade a young guy that is still developing, and it comes back to bite you in the ass. I can already like hear the fan base like, oh, we gave up on this guy too quickly and he's popping off somewhere else, right? Um, here's Johnny. Duran has taken major steps forward. He has. Sar's taken major steps forward. A lot of the young guys have developed quite a bit this season under JB and Fred Vincent and this entire coaching staff. So I think the organization, from my understanding, talking to reporters, they're just being very patient right now. When there is a move to be made, they're going to strike. They're just being very calculative with how they want to construct this roster. Because if you look at the Detroit Pistons roster right now, like you look at the long-term contracts, there's two players that are on long-term contracts. Cade Cunningham, who just signed a supermax extension, and Isaiah Stewart. Everyone else, Tobias Harris, 2-year deal. Malik Beasley, expiring, probably will get re-signed. Tim Hardaway Jr., expiring. Simone Fontecchio, 2-year deal. That's very movable. And all the other guys are on rookie deals, rookie contracts, cheap deals. You have, some decisions to make whether or not you want to extend Ivy or Duran. So I think this front office is set up in a way where when there is a move to be made, I think it will be made. In my opinion, I think it will either be made this summer, possibly, or in a year. Just the way the contracts are lined up with the Detroit Pistons right now, I think when you look at just long-term contracts, a lot of these guys are very movable. A lot of these guys are on rookie deals. So I'm just going to trust in this front office because they've done a complete 180 this season, bringing in costly veterans that have really impacted winning. We're talking about the Detroit Pistons having 30 wins. We're talking about a team that isn't a play-in team. They're a playoff team right now. So I think when there's a move to be made and they feel that there's a number two guy to pair next to Cade, they definitely will. But I think for right now, they're just evaluating everyone on this team and seeing what everyone can do at the end of the day. I know fans want that, that star, that big move, but I would just caution fans, like, enjoy this ride for this season, see how they do in the playoffs. And I think once we, get into the playoffs and when the Pistons do make the playoffs, because I do think they will be a playoff team, we're going to see where they need areas of improvement. We're going to see what positions they possibly need to upgrade. And when we've talked about it, we've talked about more front court depth. We've talked about more size at the power forward in the center position. We've talked about, more secondary scoring and ball handling all throughout the season on these post-game podcasts. So I think we'll find out a lot about this team over the next 25, 26 games, whatever's left for the season. But overall, I'm just enjoying this ride right now. I know I rambled probably for like the last 5 to 6 minutes. I do apologize about that, but I do want to get into a couple more comments and questions, with you guys. I do appreciate the comments as always, though. Thank you for that comment. You really got me, talking. I, I just like love going on these post game podcasts with you guys. We do have a comment about Devin Booker, and it says Devin Booker is coming home when Phoenix falls apart this offseason. Unless Devin Booker says, "Get me out of Phoenix," I don't see the guy leaving personally. I could see KD leaving. I could see Bradley Beal leaving. Devin Booker seems like he just wants to be a Phoenix Sun for life. I really do. But I get why fans want Book back home. Grand Rapids always reps the city. I just saw a picture of him wearing a Grand Rapids Griffin hockey jersey when he was out to dinner during All-Star break. I get it. There's that, Michigan connection, always repping, all of our sports teams. I get it. But I really wouldn't like hold my breath for Devin Booker. Personally, I think the way that Phoenix is invested, they don't really have a whole lot of draft picks. And if he is dealt, I would imagine it would be a team that has a lot of draft capital, like Houston, Brooklyn, or OKC. I think those are the teams that, like, if they really wanted Devin Booker, they could probably go get him. And then Phoenix would be okay with that because then they could, kind of restart a rebuild. But it'll be interesting to see what happens in the playoffs because that's a very expensive team that they have constructed. If they don't at least make a Western Conference Finals or make some noise in the playoffs, they're going to probably have to just, blow it up. And who knows what happens with Kevin Durant, but Devin Booker seems like he's pretty content playing for the Phoenix Suns, even if they're not, winning personally. So wanted to get into this question. Um, I want to say it was from, here it is, Sage Reviews. He said, "Who do you want to see the Pistons beat in a playoff series, even if it's just winning one game?" That's a great question, Sage. Um, I think right now, just for the timeline purposes, I want Indiana. And we're gonna get into it tomorrow. We're doing a podcast with Eric Vincent, Detroit Pistons beat reporter from Clutch Points. We're going to be talking about the Indiana Pacers. But Indiana's a team that I'd really like just for like the rivalry purposes, because kind of rekindling that from my childhood. I'd love to see a Pistons Pacers first round matchup. Wouldn't mind a Pistons Knicks first round matchup as well. Those are the two teams that I'm looking at where it's just like, I think either of those teams give the Pistons definitely some challenges, especially with the size that they have in the front court. Karl Anthony Towns, Miles Turner. I think that would be a really good test for the Detroit Pistons to go up against personally. But I'd love to, steal a game or steal possibly a playoff series from either one of those organizations. Probably more Indiana because like there's been some like real beef, some real rivalry personally, but that's just me. That's just me. But I'm probably going to wrap this podcast up, you guys. We'll be live tomorrow and on Sunday. You're gonna see me all weekend, basically. Tomorrow we'll be live around 7:15 with Eric Vincent. We're gonna be talking your Detroit Pistons, probably be like an hour, maybe hour and a half podcast with him. And then on Sunday, we're gonna be doing a post-game podcast immediately after the Pistons Hawks game. But as always, you guys, I appreciate you guys coming in, talking Pistons with me at midnight right now. Hope you guys have a great night, great weekend. Go Pistons. Peace.